guys, the podcast. Today we're starting a new series called the Nutrition Series, and Shakara, we're going to be talking about nutrition. So today we're talking about the elephant in the room. It's protein. It's what everyone talks about these days, getting enough protein, and some people just are like, why do we need all of this protein? So I'm going to break it all down for you today and also talk about what you should be actually doing and how much you should be having and what it's actually important for, and also the fact that you can have too much protein. So let's get into it. So when we're talking about protein, it's not just this gym bro conversation, and it's not just talking about muscle building. Yes, protein is made up. Our muscles are made up of protein, so protein intake is essential for muscle building, particularly if you are exercising, if you're doing weight training, if you're doing running, whatever you're doing. It's definitely important for that recovery and repair. However, even if you don't exercise regularly, it still is essential for so many different aspects. So if you're under the impression that, if you don't do 6 workouts a week, or if you only go on walks a couple of days a week, that you don't need protein, I'm here to help you understand why you actually do need protein and how much you potentially need, which is just individual at the end of the day, but just give you a bit of a ballpark figure. And we'll go through some different protein sources, etc. Because, with my own health journey, I found that understanding why you're doing things within nutrition is really a big motivator to actually do the thing, because we're exposed to so much information of what we should be doing every day, what we should be eating, what we shouldn't be eating, and it gets really overwhelming really fast. And it's really important for us, I think, to understand the reasons why we're doing things rather than just listening to some wellness influencer that doesn't have any qualifications in what they're saying. So let's get into it. So what actually is protein? Protein is a macronutrient, meaning it's one of the nutrients that is large to digest. So we have macronutrients and we have micronutrients. Macronutrients are composed of protein, fats, carbohydrates, fiber, and they're basically just bigger molecules than micronutrients. For example, our vitamins and minerals are micronutrients because they're a lot smaller, but that doesn't mean they're less important. So protein is a macronutrient, and it's composed of what we call amino acids. So these amino acids are all joined together, and then that forms we have around 20 different types of amino acids. 9 of them are essential. What essential means, which we'll also talk about in our fat episode, essential means that your body can't produce those amino acids, so you have to get them through your diet. You have to eat them. So there's 9 essential amino acids, and there's around 11 non-essential amino acids that your body can produce. Obviously, the 9 essential amino acids are important to get through your food because different foods have different amino acid profiles. And particularly if you're following like a vegetarian or vegan diet, a lot of vegetarian and vegan proteins aren't complete proteins, which complete proteins are proteins that have all of the essential amino acids. So what we often recommend in those cases is to do protein combining, where we have different types of protein sources in the same meal or across the day to make sure that you're covering all of those bases. So that's just a little side note, but we'll come back to nutrition a little bit later on. First, I want to talk about protein and how it affects your gut. So again, a lot of people just associate protein with muscle building, but your gut actually needs a lot of protein to function. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So amino acids help with building our gut lining. And our gut lining barrier or gut barrier is really essential for protecting what's inside of our gut and the contents of our gut, because if we don't do that, it can lead to something called leaky gut, which is where the cells that line the intestines separate slightly and they create these little gaps that things that are in your gut that are meant to stay in your gut can pass through those gaps into the bloodstream. This is particularly important with any digestive symptoms, but also in like skin conditions and a whole range of different things. Protein's really essential for that process, and your gut lining's constantly renewing itself, so shedding off through your stool. So we need to make sure that you have the compounds to rebuild that gut lining, and that essentially comes from protein. There's other nutrients involved and other things that we can do and other processes that are important within your gut environment, but protein is really helpful for rebuilding the gut lining, and particularly an amino acid called glutamine, which you may have heard of glutamine supplements, but you can get that through just having enough protein in your diet. And particularly if you do have digestive issues or any issues with your gut lining, a lot of the time you become quite sensitive to food and really have difficulty digesting protein, because protein is a lot harder to actually physically break down in our stomach acid if you have digestive issues and compared to, say, white bread or simple carbohydrates. So what you can include are things like slow cooked foods, and particularly things with bones in them if you eat meat, because that releases a lot of things like collagen and glycine and different amino acids that can really help with supporting and strengthening the gut barrier. And speaking of stomach acid, amino acids are also required for production of stomach acid. So if you have any issues like bloating or a lot of gassiness, reflux, indigestion, that can sometimes be a sign of low stomach acid. And we need amino acids to actually produce the acid, which then feeds back into actually how well we can digest the proteins, because that is really important as well, because the stomach acid essentially breaks the protein back apart. So how I mentioned earlier, the amino acids are joined together to form proteins. The bonds that bind those amino acids together are broken apart in the stomach acid, so then we can absorb the amino acids. So that process is obviously very important when we're talking about bioavailability of protein and actually digesting it properly. It's like anything, you can eat all the right things, but if your gut's not functioning correctly and you're not digesting food properly, there's no point. So that is a really important, and there's other nutrients that really help production of stomach acid too, but that is a really big one. And the breaking down of those protein-rich foods, for example, red meat, it's also really important for other nutrients like iron and B12. So the stomach acid helps break apart the proteins, those nutrients like iron and B12, and then it frees them up to then be absorbed in your small intestine. So it's a really important process for that as well. So as you can see, protein is just not about muscle building, it's about so much more. But that's one example of how it's affecting your... So how does protein then affect your skin? So like I mentioned earlier, amino acids help build up things in the body. One of those things is collagen. So collagen is really important for like our skin barrier function, skin elasticity, and its skin integrity. So if we're not having enough protein through the diet to support collagen production, then we're going to have that sort of lackluster looking skin. So collagen production does absolutely drop off a cliff by the time you get to 25. So collagen supplementation can actually be really helpful, and I recommend that to so many people, particularly gut issues and skin issues. So with a collagen supplement, you really want a hydrolyzed collagen, because collagen's really a buzzword at the moment, and there's so many different terms and products thrown around at you, and there's some collagen products that are just made up of vitamin C, which can be a tenth of even your daily requirements. So it's essentially just giving you some nutrients that help produce collagen, but you can really get that through your diet, so it's a waste of money. But hydrolyzed collagen, and particularly type 1 and type 3 collagen peptides, are really helpful for the skin barrier, and I definitely recommend that if you are over 25 to help top up on your collagen stores. But that doesn't mean that we can't still have enough protein and those amino acids like glycine, for example, that help produce collagen. So glycine, proline, and hydroxyproline are the amino acids, the main ones that help produce collagen. So including them into your diet can be really helpful, as well as potentially a collagen supplement. I recommend a few different brands. There's quite a lot of good quality collagen supplements out there these days, actually. There is practitioner-only ones, which means you need a script from a practitioner like myself to access them. So there's a few different brands that do them, and they're often higher quality. More regulation goes into them in the production phase of them. And then I also really like Chief's collagen powder, and also Nutra-Organic's do a good one too. But there's, like I said, heaps of other brands as well. So that's skin health. Also, I should mention as well, really important for wound healing and skin barrier repair. So if you do have breakouts and you're prone to breakouts, helping that healing process obviously helps reduce things like scarring, and also in conditions like eczema and whatnot, it helps with strengthening the skin barrier so it doesn't get broken as easily, which can then lead to infections like staph and whatnot. So protein can be really helpful in that respect as well. Protein and hormones. So protein actually can help our hormonal health as well. So it can help with hormone production, which we'll come back to a lot in the fat episode, because fats are really essential for helping with hormone production. But protein can help with hormone production. It can also help with blood sugar regulation. The reason blood sugar regulation is important with hormonal health is it's very foundational to how our body and our nervous system is functioning. So blood sugar regulation essentially means how well you can maintain your blood glucose level across the day. In an ideal world, we want your blood glucose to stay quite steady. It will go up and down what you've eaten. You have carbohydrates. This is broken down into glucose, which is then used as our primary energy source. But what we run into issues with is when the blood glucose is dramatically spiking and then dramatically falling. And this can happen with really carbohydrate rich diets, particularly the poorer carbohydrate sources, like those really simple white carbohydrates, white bread, white pasta, white rice, all of those sort of things have a really high glycemic index, meaning that your blood sugar spikes quite dramatically and then it will drop slightly after. And this links back to our hormones because it affects a hormone called insulin. So insulin is a hormone that regulates our blood glucose. So when the blood glucose is higher, insulin shoots up as well, because it essentially knocks on the door of your cell and says, hey, I've got some glucose. So it lets the glucose into the cell. But when we have this blood glucose going up and down for a long period of time, it can lead to what's called insulin resistance. So your cells become less receptive to the insulin. Then more insulin is being produced to try and stimulate the cells to let the blood glucose in, which leads to things like diabetes. But it's also quite common in PCOS. There's an insulin resistant type of PCOS. What protein does is, if you have protein alongside a carbohydrate, so if you are having white rice, for example, or even brown rice, it can really slow down how quickly that glucose is absorbed. So it slows that curve and makes it a lot more gradual and gentle. So then you're not getting that dramatic crash and that development potentially in the long term of insulin resistance. But also when that blood sugar drop comes plummeting down, it drops our energy levels, it drops our mood, it just plays chaos in the whole body. Then that blood sugar regulation is also really foundational to other hormones. So if our blood sugar regulation is off, it stimulates cortisol production, which can then influence our reproductive hormones like estrogen and progesterone, often quite susceptible to blood sugar changes as well. So that's why protein is really essential for hormonal health too. And this sort of leads into why protein is really important for your energy production as well. So it helps, again, stabilize your blood sugar, so then your energy levels aren't fluctuating as much through the day. So particularly if you have that 3 p.m. slump, I would be asking if you're having enough protein in the morning time. That's really important for energy production, but it's also, again, a lot of these protein-rich foods have a lot of other nutrients like B vitamins and like iron, things that are really helpful for our red blood cell production, oxygenation, and also mitochondrial health, so meaning the batteries of our cells that help us produce energy. So there's a lot of different aspects as to why protein can influence energy. And protein also has a big influence on our mood. So in conditions like anxiety, for example, we should always be addressing how much protein is being consumed, because like I explained earlier, the amino acids that get rebroken down in the stomach acid and then absorbed can help actually produce or make our neurotransmitters, which are our brain chemicals. Then the types of amino acids that you're having can help us produce different neurotransmitters like GABA, for example, which really helps calm us down and helps with our sleep quality, and help with serotonin production, which is one of our really feel-good hormones. Really helps with that whole picture of our mood. And obviously if our energy levels are stable as well, that's going to help us feel better, etc., etc. So definitely helps with the whole mood situation as well. And I particularly find with anxiety, depression even, and also PMS and PMDD, protein is absolutely essential. Not to say that other aspects of mental health need to be addressed, because they definitely do. It's very multifactorial, but protein can be a really big support in those cases. So there's that protein influences that people don't usually expect, but there's obviously so much more that protein does, but that just scratches the surface on a bit of insight as to what protein does and why we're always banging on about protein and saying you need to have more protein, and etc, etc. So now I want to talk about how to actually get enough protein in and how much you should be having. So requirements vary from person to person. It depends on your age, your activity level, a lot of different factors that go into it. But just as a general ballpark, I want women focusing on reaching at least 100 grams of protein per day. So if we break that down, it looks like if you're having 3 regular meals, 30 grams of protein with each meal, then a couple or one protein-rich snack throughout the day as well. So what this could look like, to give you an idea of how much protein is contained in different foods, refer to the list so I give you the actual numbers. Let's consult the list, if you will. Okay. So 2 eggs contain 12 grams of protein. So this shows how if you're having 2 eggs on toast for breakfast, it's not enough to reach that 30 grams. So what I would be suggesting is having some cottage cheese with the eggs, or having 3 eggs in a scramble, or having a scoop of collagen powder in your coffee with your 2 eggs. 170 grams of Greek yogurt has 15 to 18 grams. You can also get higher protein Greek yogurt these days, and you can also get things like YoPro, which is higher protein as well. 100 grams of chicken is 22 to 25 grams, obviously depending. But with animal proteins, you want to have a palm size amount of meat protein. 1 cup of lentils has around 15 to 18 grams of protein, and protein powders vary, but usually 1 serving of protein has about 20 to 25 grams of protein in it. So that sort of gives you a bit of insight as to how much protein there is in different foods. And I also too wanted to emphasize, because I see this quite a lot with the gym junkies, is starting to get protein just from powders and bars. With protein powders and protein bars, particularly when they're good quality ones, are really helpful to reach our protein requirements, and it makes life a lot easier day to day, and particularly if you're busy and limited with time and preparation time. But we really need to prioritize getting our protein from whole food sources if we can. And this is because eating food in its whole food form offers so much more nutrients. So we want to be thinking about micronutrients. Like I mentioned before, with red meat you get the iron and the B12 with it. With the lentils you get fiber as well, and you get polyphenols, and you get all these other beautiful things with it. So I think we really need to be mindful of that. Protein powders and bars and things can be really good and helpful, but you obviously want to have good quality ones with whole food based ingredients and nice sweeteners. So a lot of sweeteners, particularly people with IBS, can get flare-ups from these artificial sweeteners. So opting for ones that are whole food based and use things like monk fruit extract, for example, can be really helpful. The collagen powder I mentioned earlier, and then also they have collagen bars, like beef biltong bars and beef biltong packets as well. Love them. I also really like Health Lab and True Protein. They do really good protein bars as well, and protein powders. Yeah, there's a few good options. A lot of good options out there, but it's just really about understanding the ingredients and making sure you can recognize the ingredients, and not it's just numbers and preservatives and words and things like that. Here we go. The protein, how much you should be having, where you can get it from, and what it actually does in your body. If you found this interesting, please let me know, because I really think this education can be game-changing with your health, because again, if you understand why you're doing something, you're more motivated to actually do it, and actually doing it is how you get the actual results. So let me know if you enjoyed this episode, but otherwise I will catch you in a fortnight.